Kamala Harris represents perhaps the most striking example of how identity politics has completely divorced political success from competence, charisma, or genuine achievement. Her rise through the ranks of American politics reads like a case study in how the modern Democratic Party has abandoned merit in favor of demographic checkboxes, creating a hollow shell of a politician who embodies everything wrong with contemporary progressive politics. This isn't just about policy disagreements or partisan differences. This is about the fundamental collapse of political standards, where someone can reach the second highest office in the land despite displaying a consistent pattern of intellectual vapidity, strategic incompetence, and an almost pathological inability to articulate coherent thoughts under pressure. Harris doesn't just represent bad politics, she represents the death of politics as a serious intellectual endeavor. From the very beginning, Harris's political career has been defined not by organic grassroots support or compelling vision, but by careful demographic positioning and institutional backing. She emerged from the California Democratic machine not because she inspired voters or demonstrated exceptional leadership, but because she checked the right boxes at the right time. Her relationship with Willie Brown, the powerful San Francisco political boss, launched her career in a way that would have ended any Republican's political aspirations before they began. Brown himself admitted to helping her career, appointing her to lucrative state positions while they were romantically involved. This isn't ancient history or irrelevant gossip, it's the foundation of her entire political trajectory. She didn't earn her first positions through merit or democratic selection, she received them through personal connections with a man who was married to someone else at the time. But what's more revealing than the affair itself is how Harris has consistently avoided any serious scrutiny of this period. A genuine politician would either own the controversy or provide a compelling counter-narrative. Harris has done neither, instead relying on the protective shield of identity politics to deflect questions. Any serious examination of her early career is immediately reframed as sexism or racism, a pattern that would define her entire political strategy. Harris's tenure as California's Attorney General reveals the fundamental contradictions that define her political persona. She marketed herself as a progressive prosecutor, someone who would reform the system from within. The reality was far more complex and far more damaging to her carefully constructed image. During her time as San Francisco's district attorney and later as California's Attorney General, Harris built a reputation on being tough on crime in ways that directly contradicted her later progressive positioning. She opposed marijuana legalization while admitting to smoking it herself, a level of hypocrisy that would be career-ending for most politicians. She fought against police reform measures, opposed the death penalty in theory while defending it in practice, and consistently sided with law enforcement over civil liberties. Most damaging was her office's practice of threatening to jail parents of truant children, a policy that disproportionately affected low-income families and communities of color. This wasn't tough love or innovative policy, it was punitive governance that criminalized poverty and family dysfunction. Yet Harris defended these policies with the same vacant smile she would later use to deflect criticism as vice president. The pattern here isn't just policy inconsistency, it's the complete absence of any governing philosophy beyond political expedience. Harris didn't evolve on these issues through intellectual growth or changing circumstances, she simply adopted whatever position seemed most politically advantageous at any given moment. This isn't pragmatism, it's intellectual nihilism disguised as political strategy. Harris's time in the Senate should have been her opportunity to demonstrate leadership, build coalitions, and establish herself as a serious national figure. Instead, she spent 6 years as a backbencher who specialized in viral moments during committee hearings while accomplishing virtually nothing of substance. Her questioning style during confirmation hearings became legendary among progressive activists, but for all the wrong reasons. Rather than substantive policy discussions or serious constitutional examination, Harris turned every hearing into a performance art piece designed to generate social media clips. Her confrontation with Brett Kavanaugh during his confirmation hearings is emblematic of this approach: lots of theatrical indignation, zero substantive impact. The problem wasn't that Harris was combative or aggressive, the problem was that her combativeness was entirely performative. She would ask loaded questions designed to create viral moments rather than elicit useful information or make substantive points. This isn't effective opposition, it's political theater designed to build a personal brand rather than achieve policy goals. During her entire Senate tenure, Harris was the primary sponsor of exactly 0 major pieces of legislation that became law. She co-sponsored various progressive wish list items that had no chance of passage, but she never built the relationships or demonstrated the legislative skill necessary to actually move policy. For someone supposedly being groomed for higher office, this record of legislative accomplishment is remarkably thin. Harris's 2020 presidential campaign represents one of the most spectacular political collapses in modern Democratic primary history. Despite entering the race with massive institutional support, media attention, and fundraising advantages, she managed to poll at 0% in her home state of California before dropping out before the first primary vote was cast. The campaign's failure wasn't due to bad luck or poor timing. It was the inevitable result of Harris's fundamental weaknesses as a politician finally being exposed to national scrutiny. When she couldn't rely on California's Democratic machine or friendly local media, her limitations became impossible to hide. Her policy positions were incoherent mess that tried to appeal to every faction within the Democratic Party while satisfying none of them. She flip-flopped on Medicare for all multiple times within the same campaign, couldn't articulate a clear position on criminal justice reform despite it being supposedly her area of expertise, and seemed genuinely surprised when voters expected her to defend her record as a prosecutor. But the most damaging aspect of the campaign was Harris's complete inability to connect with voters on a personal level. Her interactions with potential supporters felt scripted and artificial, her attempts at humor fell flat, and her responses to criticism were defensive and tone-deaf. She came across as someone who felt entitled to support rather than someone who had earned it. The infamous moment when Tulsi Gabbard destroyed her debate performance by pointing out her hypocrisy on criminal justice issues wasn't just a single bad moment, it was the crystallization of everything wrong with Harris's candidacy. She had no authentic response because there was no authentic politician underneath the carefully constructed persona. Joe Biden's selection of Harris as his running mate represents the ultimate triumph of identity politics over merit. Biden didn't choose Harris because she was the best qualified candidate or because she brought unique skills to the ticket. He chose her because he had committed to selecting a woman of color, and she was the least risky option available. This isn't speculation or partisan interpretation. Biden explicitly stated that he would only consider women for the vice presidency, and his campaign made it clear that racial diversity was a primary consideration. Harris was selected not for what she could do, but for what she looked like and what constituencies she supposedly represented. Harris has never been able to escape the perception that she was chosen for her identity rather than her abilities because that perception is largely accurate. This dynamic has made it impossible for Harris to succeed in the vice presidency because she's constantly trying to prove she belongs rather than simply doing the job. Every failure is attributed to discrimination, every criticism is dismissed as prejudice, and every success is minimized as tokenism. She's trapped in a prison of lowered expectations that she helped create. Harris's performance as vice president has been a masterclass in political incompetence that has somehow managed to exceed even the lowest expectations. From her first major assignment handling the border crisis to her international diplomacy efforts, she has demonstrated a consistent pattern of failure that would be comedic if it weren't so consequential. Her approach to the border crisis exemplified everything wrong with her political instincts. Rather than taking ownership of a difficult issue and working toward solutions, she immediately began playing semantic games about whether she was actually responsible for the border while simultaneously avoiding visiting the border itself. When she finally did visit, it was clearly a political stunt designed to deflect criticism rather than engage with the actual problem. But it was her international tricks that truly revealed the depth of her inadequacy. Her performance during the European crisis following Russia's invasion of Ukraine was embarrassing on a level that damaged American credibility. Her word salads about the significance of the passage of time and the importance of working together in the face of shared challenges became international memes that undermined serious diplomacy. The most revealing moment came during her trip to Poland, where she was asked about Ukrainian refugees. Her response, giggling inappropriately while discussing a humanitarian crisis, demonstrated a complete lack of emotional intelligence and situational awareness. This wasn't a slip of the tongue or a moment of nervousness, it was the behavior of someone fundamentally unsuited for high-stakes diplomacy. Perhaps Harris's most glaring weakness is her complete inability to communicate effectively in unscripted situations. Her speaking style has become a running joke, but the underlying problem is deadly serious for someone in her position. Harris has developed a peculiar rhetorical style that relies on circular reasoning, meaningless platitudes, and awkward attempts at profundity. Her famous description of time as the significance of the passage of time isn't just a single embarrassing moment, it's representative of how she approaches every complex issue. She speaks in empty phrases that sound meaningful but convey no actual information. This isn't just a matter of public speaking skills, it's evidence of fuzzy thinking and intellectual laziness. When Harris speaks extemporaneously, she reveals that she doesn't actually understand the issues she's discussing at anything more than a surface level. She's memorized talking points and catchphrases, but she can't engage with the underlying concepts or adapt her thinking to new situations. Her interviews with friendly media outlets have become exercises in damage control rather than opportunities to communicate her vision or defend her record. Even sympathetic interviewers struggle to get coherent responses from her on substantive issues, leading to increasingly awkward exchanges that raise more questions than they answer. Throughout her career, Harris has consistently used identity politics as a shield against criticism and accountability. Any substantive critique of her record or performance is immediately reframed as an attack on women or people of color, making honest evaluation of her qualifications nearly impossible in mainstream political discourse. This strategy has been devastatingly effective in the short term, allowing her to avoid serious scrutiny while advancing through the ranks of Democratic politics. But it has also created a situation where she's never been forced to develop actual political skills or substantive policy expertise. She's been protected from the normal processes of political selection and accountability that would have revealed her weaknesses earlier in her career. The result is a politician who has reached the highest levels of government without ever demonstrating the competence, charisma, or vision that would normally be required for such positions. She's the ultimate product of a political system that has prioritized symbolic representation over actual representation, creating a hollow figure who embodies progressive values while being incapable of advancing them. Harris's rise to the vice presidency represents a broader failure of American political institutions to maintain standards of competence and accountability. Her career trajectory would have been impossible in a healthy political system that rewarded merit and punished failure. The Democratic Party's decision to elevate Harris despite her obvious weaknesses reflects a deeper institutional rot that prioritizes short-term political advantage over long-term governance capacity. Party leaders were so focused on checking demographic boxes and appealing to identity-based constituencies that they ignored the fundamental question of whether she was actually qualified for higher office. The media's role in this failure has been particularly egregious. Rather than holding Harris accountable for her record or performance, mainstream outlets have consistently provided her with favorable coverage while attacking her critics as prejudiced. This isn't journalism, it's political advocacy disguised as news coverage. The result is a political system that has become disconnected from the basic requirements of democratic governance. When someone can reach the vice presidency despite demonstrating consistent incompetence, the system has failed in its most basic function of selecting qualified leaders. Harris's international profile has become a significant liability for American foreign policy. Her word salads and inappropriate responses to serious questions have made her a figure of ridicule among foreign leaders and diplomats, undermining American credibility at a time when strong leadership is essential. The problem isn't just that Harris is ineffective, it's that she's actively counterproductive. Her attempts at diplomacy often make situations worse by confusing allies and emboldening adversaries. Foreign leaders have learned to work around her rather than with her, recognizing that she lacks the authority and competence to make meaningful commitments on behalf of the United States. This dynamic has forced the Biden administration to limit Harris's role in international affairs, effectively sidelining the vice president from one of the core functions of the office. The fact that she can't be trusted to represent American interests abroad is a damning indictment of the selection process that put her in this position. Harris has become more than just a failed politician. She's become a cultural symbol of everything wrong with contemporary progressive politics. Her rise represents the complete triumph of identity over merit, symbolism over substance, and political correctness over political competence. Her supporters don't defend her record or her performance. They defend her right to be protected from criticism. This represents a fundamental shift in how we think about political accountability and democratic governance. When criticism of a politician's performance is treated as prejudice rather than legitimate democratic discourse, the system has stopped functioning as intended. The Harris phenomenon reveals how identity politics has become a substitute for actual politics, creating a system where demographic representation is considered more important than effective governance. In a healthy political system, Harris's record of failure would disqualify her from higher office. In our current system, her failures are either ignored or reframed as the result of discrimination rather than incompetence. The Democratic Party's continued investment in Harris despite her obvious weaknesses reveals a party that has lost touch with basic political reality. They've become so committed to identity politics and symbolic representation that they've forgotten that politics is ultimately about governing, not just representing. Kamala Harris represents the ultimate hollow politician, someone who has achieved the highest levels of government without demonstrating any of the qualities that would normally be required for such positions. She's the product of a political system that has prioritized demographics over competence, symbolism over substance, and political correctness over political effectiveness. Her rise to the vice presidency represents not just a personal failure, but a systemic failure of American political institutions to maintain basic standards of competence and accountability. When someone can reach the second highest office in the land despite a consistent record of intellectual vapidity, strategic incompetence, and political failure, the system itself has broken down. The Harris phenomenon reveals the ultimate bankruptcy of identity politics as a governing philosophy. By prioritizing representation over competence, Democrats have created a situation where they've elevated someone fundamentally unsuited for high office while making it impossible to hold her accountable for her failures. Harris isn't just a bad politician, she's a symbol of everything wrong with contemporary progressive politics and American political institutions more broadly. Her career represents the triumph of mediocrity over merit, symbolism over substance, and political correctness over political reality. In the end, she's not just failing as a politician, she's failing as a representative of the very values and constituencies she claims to champion. Harris isn't just incompetent, it's that her incompetence has been weaponized by a political system that has lost the ability to distinguish between representation and governance. She's the ultimate participation trophy politician, someone who has been rewarded for showing up rather than achieving anything meaningful. And in a democracy, that's not just her failure, it's all of ours.